Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. I've been a firefighter here in New York for a good decade. I've seen everything from the smallest of fires to the biggest infernos that would make you swear hell itself had opened up. Being a firefighter is amazing. You get to help people, and the people you work with become your family. It can be rough if you're raising a family of your own, but I've never really had that problem, being the lone wolf I am. It's not that I dislike the idea of having my own family, it's just that I'm pretty much married to my job and never really had the time to meet anyone. In a way, it's a blessing, given the dangerous nature of my work. But enough about all that. I'm here to share a story about some strange fires I dealt with a few years back. The first in this series of strange calls came in on a Friday night. It was 11 p.m. when we got up and headed to the docks to check out a warehouse fire that had broken out. So far, so good, as everything seemed relatively normal. We put the blaze out quickly upon arrival, and after reviewing the scene, it appeared to be an electrical fire. Later, confirmation would reveal this as well. Alright, I thought, these things happen, and it was resolved. We got back to the station and fought several other fires over the next 24 hours. These were all fairly normal occurrences, or so it seemed, anyway. Then, Saturday at 11 p.m., we got another call about a warehouse fire near the docks. I tend to notice odd things, like 2 nights in a row with an 11 p.m. call. It was strange, but probably nothing to worry about. Still, I made a mental note. The fire was quickly contained, and once again, it was related to an electrical issue. Odd, but I went on with my shift. 3 nights later, exactly at 11 p.m., we were called out to another fire. Once again, it was a warehouse at the docks. By this point, I was a bit weirded out. We fought this fire for a good hour and managed to subdue it. But strangely, just as we were about to pull away, the area erupted in flames again. This was unusual, but we were able to subdue the fire once more, and thankfully, no harm was done. Later, an investigation revealed another electrical fire. 3 electrical fires, all at 11 p.m., all at warehouses on the docks. If I didn't know better, I'd swear there was something going on. A couple of days later, my buddy caught me as I was coming in from work, just as he was leaving. He showed me something strange in some photos from the scenes of the fires. There was a pattern emblazoned on the walls of each burned site. It looked like a tree, distinct enough that you could see the design clearly, and next to the tree, there appeared to be a hooded figure. I remember saying, "That's strange," but I brushed it off as an odd series of coincidences. My buddy seemed to agree, but he showed me the patterns anyway, knowing I'm intrigued by things like that. The rest of my shift that night was fairly normal. There weren't any huge fires, and any first response calls we received for medical emergencies or other issues were all resolved easily. The next week was the same, standard fires, nothing too crazy. A month later, we got a call at 11 p.m. for a medical emergency. We arrived at the scene to find an older woman struggling to breathe. As we tried to calm her down, she was just screaming, "Fire! Fire!" Eventually, after some effort, we managed to calm her down. Then she looked at my buddy and said, "I'm sorry, sir, I'm sorry for your loss. Please forgive me." We looked at each other, a bit spooked, but reassured her that everything was fine. 3 nights later, at exactly 11 p.m., we got a call to respond to a house fire. The address was all too familiar, it was my buddy's house. As we made our way through the fire, we found him and managed to pull his half-burned body from the flames. Shortly afterward, his place erupted into even bigger flames. We fought the fire with everything we had, but every time we were close to getting it under control, an explosion of some sort would occur, forcing us to fight it back once more. When we finally subdued the flames, it was 4 a.m. My friend was taken to the hospital, but his family, a 7-year-old daughter, his wife, and their dog did not survive. The fire was ruled as electrical. The investigation didn't make much sense, though. I wish I had words to describe my sorrow. My buddy was forced into early retirement as his burns were too severe for him to continue doing his job. He was never the same after that, understandably. I remember going to his family's funeral. It was a cold day. My buddy wouldn't speak, so I spoke on his behalf. He looked lost. As I was about to leave, he handed me a piece of paper. I was going to take it, but he gripped my hand tightly and looked into my eyes. There was fear and deep sadness in his gaze. Once he let go, I opened the paper, and I saw that he had been sketching during the funeral. What he gave me filled me with a sense of dread as a cold wind passed by. It was a drawing of the same image emblazoned at the scenes of the warehouse fires, a tree with a dark, hooded figure next to it. I asked him what it meant, and he uttered the only 3 words I ever heard him speak again: "I saw it." Have you ever had a recurring dream? Maybe you visited the same place in a dream more than once. I'm not sure how to explain this, but I'll do my best. I work for a fire department in Chicago, and I'm very proud of my work. I've always wanted to help others growing up, and I was that kid who really admired and was impressed by those who fought fires. Granted, firefighters aren't always fighting fires. In fact, most of our calls are usually medical emergencies. But regardless, it's about helping people, and that's something I've always loved doing. My story starts about 4 years into my job. I've had this dream of a burning building since I was a child. It was partly what inspired me to become a firefighter. In the dream, I'm fighting a massive fire, and every time, there's someone in the flames. Just as I'm about to see who or what it is, I hear a woman calling out, her cries for help echoing through the inferno. Then I wake up as an explosion rings out. As I said, I've had this dream several times throughout my life. Strange as it sounds, I'm grateful for the dream because it partly led me to where I am today. One night in October of 2013, I awoke to a late-night call. It wasn't anything crazy, just a small apartment fire, but I distinctly remember a feeling of foreboding. You know that feeling you can't shake? That feeling of impending doom with no explanation? That's what I felt. We put the fire out quickly, and everything was fine. The tenant was a little shaken up, but their apartment could be salvaged. I went to sleep that night and had the dream again. I was in the building, the fire was raging, and I could hear a woman screaming while a figure of some kind stood in the flames. I always felt a pull toward this figure, but it was usually overpowered by my desire to save whoever was screaming. The explosion happened again, but this time it was so loud and real that I swore it was happening in my room. As it turns out, it was just another call. This time, there was a bigger fire at a utility building. As we worked to put the fire out, I swear I saw someone standing in the flames for a split second. This was followed by an overwhelming sensation of dread. We extinguished the fire, and no one was there. No one was even in the utility building, as it was 3 a.m. I shook it off, and shortly after my shift ended, I went home. I crashed hard and was immediately hit with the same dream again. It's important to note that this dream, which used to happen every so often, was now recurring every few nights. I didn't entirely know what to make of it, but I loved my job, and I had a family and home I cherished. I wasn't going to let that dream ruin it. The next several nights were relatively quiet. We had some small forest fires and medical emergencies, but everyone involved turned out okay. Still, though, I felt that creeping dread growing stronger each night. It all led up to a late October night when my fears became a reality. The dread became clear, and my entire view on life would be altered forever. I remember the call quite clearly. A large apartment complex had burst into flames very suddenly. We responded immediately, arriving quickly. I remember the massive size of the building and the intensity of the fire. Rushing in headfirst, we rescued several tenants from the lower floors. We hammered the fire with everything we had while going in and out of the building, saving everyone we could. I remember climbing a ladder and ascending several stories until I reached a familiar sight. There was a stairwell. Everything around me was filled with smoke, but I eventually found a clear spot. It was eerily familiar, it was my dream. I saw something in the flames before hearing a woman's distant scream. I turned toward the sound, and that's when the explosion happened. I dove to the floor, feeling flames soar around and above me. Realizing I wasn't dead and was strangely okay, I stood up and heard the woman still screaming. Pushing forward, step by step, the fire grew stronger. I felt something in the building with me, something following me. I know it sounds crazy, and you have to understand, I'm a very level-headed guy. I pressed on, doing my job. When I reached the apartment where I believed the woman was screaming, I made my way inside and headed to the bathroom. Inside, I found a woman, and at the window was another firefighter. He took the woman's hand, and we helped them both down. I went back up to check for any other signs of life. I searched everywhere I could, in every place not engulfed in flames, but found no one. The situation was becoming too dangerous, so I headed back to the ladder and left the building for the final time. As I stepped out of the window, I heard a very distinct, disturbing yell from behind me. It was a mix of a shrill scream and an inhuman growl. I have no words to explain what I heard that night, but I quickly headed down the ladder and got out of there. It took us another 4 hours to get the fire under control, but we succeeded. Amazingly, there were no casualties, everyone in the building was safely evacuated. I can't begin to explain what I witnessed or what was happening during that fire. But I can say I've never had that recurring dream again. It was as if something willed itself into existence that night. I'm not sure what happened, but I am convinced that the fire was not natural. I have no idea what caused it or why, but I am grateful to be alive and extremely grateful that everyone survived that night. My story isn't strange. No, it's a testament to how intense fires can be and how careful people need to be. For privacy reasons, I'm not stating my name or town, but with that out of the way, let me tell you how I watched my small town burn to the ground. It started rather simply. Someone was mowing their lawn on a particularly hot summer day, despite warnings not to do so due to the heat and dryness of the land. The fire sparked and quickly took out the man and his property. People often underestimate how easy it is to start a fire and how quickly it can spread. We got the call a short while after, but by the time we arrived, this fire had already spread across the man's land. The land was several hundred acres, and over half of it was already in flames when we got there. The fire was heading toward town at an alarming rate. We quickly went into go mode for evacuations. By the time we got everyone out of town, the fire had already reached the town itself and engulfed a gas station. You can imagine what happened next. There was an explosion that caused the fire to expand extremely quickly. We spent the next several hours fighting this thing, trying to contain it. Around that time, we noticed the wind shifting and becoming much stronger, pushing the fire back toward us and causing it to grow again. Sadly, in that area, there was a lot of land and a lot of wind. If a fire broke out, it could get out of hand real fast. By nightfall, we were still battling it as it tore through town, burning everything in sight. We kept fighting, and by the next morning, we had support from other services in the surrounding area. We fought long and hard to contain it, but by the following night, it was quite clear we had lost the town. Over the next few days, we continued fighting back against the blaze. Before long, it was in danger of spreading to another town. On the dawn of the 7th day, the wind died down, and we got some unexpected rain. It helped to slow the fire down quite a bit, and it felt like a miracle since rain hadn't been forecasted, and our summers were known for their heat. The next day, we got the fire contained, and we had even more rain, which lasted another 3 days. When all was said and done, thousands of acres of land had burned to the ground, including many homes. There were no fatalities, though. We were able to evacuate everyone in the fire's path. I thank God every day for the rain, though I curse him for letting us lose the town. Everyone who lived in the town was displaced. If you could have seen the devastation the fire wrought, you'd be shocked. This goes tenfold because we were a small town. Over the years, we were able to rebuild, and the town is alive and thriving once again. We will never forget the fight or the destruction it caused. It still amazes me how, one day, your town can be there, and the next, it can suddenly not exist. All that said, our town's recovery is a testament to human strength. We were able to rebuild, and we're stronger than ever today. You can learn a lot from the successful times in your life, but you'll never learn more than during the most trying times. That's where you find out who you and your fellow people truly are, where you realize how helpless you can be. I still have nightmares about the fire, and I carry a lot of guilt for not being able to save my town the first time. I've been to therapy since, and life is better today, but I'm not sure I'll ever stop wondering if there was a way to save it back then. People who live here always tell us we did all we could, but I always think, was there a way to save it the first time? So please, always be mindful of what you're doing, especially in drier areas. Be careful, and if there's ever an evacuation, be ready to leave at an instant's notice. I'm a retired fire captain who used to work in Montana. Many years ago, there was an unexplainable incident that occurred near some crossroads late one night in the town I live in. It was there that I witnessed something horrific, a fire that burned much of the town. This was no ordinary fire, it seemed almost like it had a mind of its own. Did it really? Probably not, but there was something unusual going on for sure. I responded to the scene of the fire at the crossroads. The first thing you need to understand is, I'm not the superstitious sort at all, but this fire was odd. It spread in all four directions, forming a wide wall and expanding outward in every direction possible. If that sounds strange, I have something even stranger for you. We quickly sprang into action, fighting this fire, while police and others helped with evacuations. Yet, the more we fought the fire, the more it seemed to grow, not in the typical way where it finds more fuel, but as though it was growing on its own. Any deterrent we used seemed to just make it grow larger. I've never seen a fire like this, before or since. We could temporarily impede the fire's progress, but it would grow taller and slowly advance. The heat was incredible, even for a fire. We had every firefighter from our town and a few from neighboring towns trying to create a containment line, but still, it progressed. Inside the fire, you could hear a strange calling, like a choir, and it was clearly audible. This wasn't something only I heard, several people reported it. Not long after we began hearing this, we got calls that a house in town had started burning. We sent some of the neighboring units out, and it was later reported that the house had just shot up in flames out of nowhere. That fire began to spread so quickly it started working its way back toward the other fire, and eventually, the two fires joined together. As the massive walls of fire grew, so did the volume of that strange choir. I'd like to say it was an auditory hallucination caused by the heat, but it was so clear that I can't explain it away. By this point, we had evacuated the town completely, so at least no one was in immediate danger. We chased the fire down into town, trying our best to contain it, but nothing we did was working. Before we knew it, half the town was up in flames. This is where things took a deeply strange turn. The fire slowly crept forward until it reached the local church. There, it seemed to shoot toward the building, which immediately burst into flames and quickly burned to the ground. After this, it started to rain, and as it rained, the flames slowly faded away until they were gone. When we assessed the damage in town, we found only smoke damage to most places. All the buildings, even those fully engulfed, were still standing and seemed okay, except for the church. The church was the only building that had burned completely to the ground. How do you explain that? I've never seen anything like this in my life, before or since. Even talking about it now, I realize how crazy I sound, but if you had been there, you'd understand. The only thing stranger than the fire was the choir within it. Why would a fire sing so audibly? Was there something inside the fire? Could something have been controlling this monstrosity? I still don't understand it at all. I'm not much of a churchgoer myself, but I have to wonder, why was the church the only thing that burned? That's my story. Make of it what you will. Has anyone else experienced a fire like this? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.